Welcome to Inflection Time. I'm Silken Laumann. Every life has turning points, those moments that change everything. In this podcast, I sit down with remarkable people to explore the challenges, choices, and unexpected events that shape who we are. From heartbreak to triumph, fear to clarity, these are the stories that remind us that growth isn't linear and meaning is often found in the moments we least expect. Inflection Time, uncovering the moments that make us. In this episode of Inflection Time, I sit down with Dan Hill, an award-winning singer-songwriter, author, and storyteller whose music has moved generations. Dan's journey is one of honesty and evolution, from writing timeless hits like Sometimes When We Touch to exploring identity, forgiveness, and purpose through his art and his life. He opens up about success, vulnerability, and the inflection points that shaped who he is beyond the spotlight. His story reminds us that growth often comes from the moments that break us open, when we find the courage to tell the truth about who we are and what we've lived. This is Inflection Time, uncovering the moments that make us. I've got Dan Hill here. Let's get started. And you're just coming off a Lifetime Achievement Award.
It was actually the Canadian Music Hall of Fame Award.
Wow.
Sorry, I go...
Finally, you're the Canadian Music Hall.
There are so many awards. There's like this Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame, et cetera, et cetera. It's really, really hard to keep track of them all.
Not many people have that problem, Dan. That is definitely a first world problem. All your awards. That's amazing.
It was a really great ceremony. And I love because all the other acts were also different. There's like Sum 41 and great Glass Tiger. So it was fun because we were all so different musically.
Yeah, and that's a long time coming. You deserve that honor. And what did it mean to you?
Well, I was kind of touched, maybe a little bit surprised, because most of my success in music has been in the States. If not my own hits, which were big in the States, the big artists that recovered my songs were usually American: Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, blah, blah, blah. So I've always been a little bit under the radar in Canada because I haven't had the same presence here. Not that I'm complaining. So I was surprised, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We were talking about this earlier with another artist about how when you're a songwriter or you're behind the scenes, you're creating the song in lots of ways, with the singer, but with the vocalist. But it's your song, and then you kind of release it, and I guess they can change it, they can edit it. But it's interesting that you don't nobody necessarily knows that you wrote for Britney Spears and, or Celine Dion, and you're right here in Toronto, and you're one of Canada's greatest songwriters and performers.
Well, that's really a great thing, because if you have a hit with your own song, your life is totally torpedoed. I know you can relate to this due to your unbelievable success. So it's like, with Sometimes When I Touch, I was literally chasing that song from continent to continent, because back in 78, these days, The Weeknd puts out a single, it's right around the world in a second. So it was very surreal, but busy. For 2 years, I was chasing that song as it conquered the continents. And so when I started having big covers, I didn't have to promote anything. I'm just sitting back and very fortunate.
And it wasn't as saturated. The market wasn't as saturated. There's just so many more performers now, and they're developing in all sorts of countries, and the depth of music in North America,
Well, that's true. And there was not so many big Canadian musicians in the 70s. There was Bernie Cummings, there was Anne Murray, there was Gordon Lightfoot, and basically that was it, unlike now, and there's dozens of successful artists here.
Yeah, and it's something that a lot of people don't know about you is not only, did you have some, just absolutely high profile and beautiful hits in the 70s, but you've always continued to pursue your music, whether it was through performance or writing for other people. You're so multi-talented. I actually met you, we met each other, I guess, when you were touring for your book.
Yes.
Yeah.
2009.
Yeah. And you're kind of singing and you were kind of talking and I loved it that you're combining these two mediums. And I just remember thinking like, this guy is so authentic.
Thank you.
You really put yourself out there.
Well, I've done a little bit of research on your podcast and the inflection points, and
there's only a year. That's not much research.
Well, no, so a turning point for me was performing at the Grey Cup back in 1994. In Toronto.
Yeah,
and I had to sing in a hot air balloon. I've never been in one before. I was getting vertigo. The flames were burning, and I had to sing. Celine Dion was performing. She was on the ground like a normal artist. I say, okay, I'm in the hot air balloon. Celine's on the ground. This is a symbol. This means I got to stop being an artist and work for people like Celine. And that was the big turning point, being in that hot air balloon.
I don't get it. You were getting vertigo. You were getting.
Have you been on
sick, and you wanted to continue?
No, I didn't.
No.
I wanted to.
You're like, you want to be on the. Okay, I get it. You were like, why am I here when I could be there?
Yeah, my friend said that I was gripped so much on the handles of the hot air. Have you ever been on one of those?
I haven't. I threw up. Actually,
yeah,
I loved it until you land.
Yeah, right.
And then all of a sudden, it's like you're dropping out of the sky.
Apparently, my knuckles were white from gripping the handle so hard. But that was like a real aha moment. I'm going, okay. It's kind of like going from maybe an athlete to a coach, or from an actor to a director.
Yeah.
It actually is quite a natural evolution, because you can also back it up. So if the artist says, "How can I sing that?" I can just sing it. Right?
Is it equally rewarding?
In a lot. The thing is, for me anyway, in my teens and in my 20s, I always wanted to be the center of attention. And so I really wanted to be famous, but I recorded, wrote, and released 6 albums from 1975 to 1981. So by the time 1982 happened, I was writing a hit for George Benson. I said, man, I'm 27. I feel like I'm 45. Yeah. So actually, when I transitioned,
a lot of living, like a lot of living.
And a lot of touring.
Yeah.
So when I transitioned to writing for other artists, I was absolutely thrilled. And actually, a lot of times I get hired to go in the studio and show them how to sing, or I produce it. So I usually do have a real hand in how their cover of my song works out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I loved going from a writer, producer, where no one knew who I was.
And is it kind of uniquely rewarding to see somebody's vision, like, somebody like Celine, who's got so much talent, or, Britney, same thing. And but they're struggling with the concept and idea. And then, together you can really find a way to make something magical.
And the great thing is, usually they listen. They're not kind of threatened or defensive. She said, why do you want me to sing it like that? So I said, because that's kind of like a Celineism. You use that little riff in a lot of your songs. I thought she just took it and said, okay, sometimes with the country artists in America, they're very, very redneck Republican. They love guns and knives. So
written for Reba McEntire.
And so with some of the guys I was producing, Sammy Kershaw, for example, he was a real redneck, and he had a gun in the studio. And the more I tried to get him to change his vocal, the more he was looking at the gun. And at one point I said, okay, I got to just deal with it. It's not going to be the way I want, but I don't want to get shot. So Nashville is different because of the politics driving the American South.
Yeah. As an Olympic athlete and the founder of Unsinkable, a mental health charity, I know the power of a supportive community in reaching your physical and mental fitness goals. That's why I love Good Life Fitness. It's more than a gym. It's a place where you can really thrive and find connection. As a special thanks for joining today, you can experience it yourself with an exclusive 7-day pass to any Good Life Fitness location across Canada. Visit the link in this podcast description for access. All of my podcast guests have shared the importance of physical activity in their lives. Together, let's build a healthier and happier Canada. And I mean, you also know, like when you're meeting somebody like Celine or Reba, I mean, you've been at the very forefront in this industry, so you know how bananas it can be,
and the stress,
and stress, and the touring. So I suspect that the artists have respect; they understand where you come from, but it's also your way. There's a gentleness to you.
Oh, I didn't know that, but thank you.
No, there is a gentleness to you, and I could see people feeling very safe and open with you.
Well, that's interesting. I have always been lucky insofar as I have had really, really good communication with these artists, and it's been my experience that the more gifted they are, the less of an attitude. I also found that with songwriters, the ones that were banging out hits left, right, and center for 10, 20 years, they still had a wonder about writing. We'd be finished a song, they would put me on the phone to the girlfriend and ask me to sing it to. Whereas if I was working with writers that weren't successful, they were always thinking about money. And that derailed the act of trying to write a great song.
Yeah, and when you are secure in yourself, you're gonna create better stuff, whether it's music or any really element in your life, but also you can give space to other people and other ideas because you're gonna like rock your world.
And it's great to learn.
Give you feedback.
You always want to learn,
I do have a story I want to share with you. So my mom and dad, actually, who live in different cities, both have dementia.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no, it's a tough one.
Awful.
It's a tough one. And my mom she's always been pretty unique. And she, sometimes it's like, is this dementia or is this mom, right? And
sure.
She had a stroke this summer, and we were in the hospital with her, and we weren't really reaching her. And it was pretty weird, right? When you, talked to her 2 days ago and she was there and all of a sudden she's not there and we didn't know what was going on. So I had this idea because my mom has a beautiful voice and has sung her whole life. And so I started, not well, singing songs I thought she knew. And, I tried Nana Muscori, somebody she just adored. And I tried, Scarborough Fair and, a bunch of different ones. And then I remembered that she had the biggest crush on you, which probably was inappropriate because, she was a lot older than you when you were really young singing Sometimes When We Touch. And so I broke out in a very poor version of Sometimes When We Touch. And she started singing.
That must have been so beautiful.
It was, I just was like, wow, like the power of music.
And it's the one thing that doesn't fade in memory. So the last thing you may remember when you're kind of on the edge of not being around much longer, you remember the songs and you sing them back perfectly. That's the one thing that's etched forever in your memory.
That is so interesting. And actually, that really resonates for me because I remarried in my 40s, and I married a man whose daughter had autism, and she came to live with us full time. And at that time, she was 11. She had very little language. She could kind of point out things she liked, and she could sing the lyrics of probably 100 songs.
Incredible.
It was just the most amazing thing. Yeah. And I got her an iPod, and she was able to navigate that iPod and find the songs that she wanted to listen to and sing them beautifully.
That's amazing.
So it does use a different part of the brain.
It is very, very healing. Whether you're singing music, performing music, or listening, it's one of the most healing things you can do, regardless of being.
And what if you're making music? It seems to me that when I listen to your songs and I listen to your evolution as a performer and a writer, that there's a lot of processing going on when you're writing. Is that true, or is that?
Well, with me, usually the songs that are the best were songs that were things that really happened to me. I joke around that I've made millions based on the rejections I've encountered with women. So Sometimes When I Touch a great example. This woman was 22-year-old Olympic hurdler. She was not into me. I was 19. I had to do something to make her think maybe I was worthwhile. So I wrote Sometimes When I Touch. So most of them are.
And did you get her back?
No, she said, I sang it to her over the phone.
Okay.
And she,
you're literally saying that over the phone.
Yeah, that's what you did back in 1973.
Yeah.
And she said, Danny, for a 19-year-old, you're way too intense. I'm taken off with a fullback for the Toronto Argonauts. You're probably right.
That's it. It's wonderful. I mean, this is what I've learned. I've been accused of being intense, and I think for a long time in my life, I tried to contain that intensity, and I tried to fit in in my energy, in my everything from my volume of voice to how much I dreamed about.
Sure.
And I learned it's actually impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And if you try it,
it
actually just makes you sick.
Yeah, it's not healthy.
Yeah.
I think one of the advantages of getting into, say, our late 50s, 60s, 70s, is that the studies actually show that people are happier at that age, because that's the age where we let go of feeling like we have to do things for some kind of approval. Or that's the age where we're not feeling so desperately that we want other people to approve of who we are or what we do. And so we let go of a lot of things, including trying to stay and not be intense. By the time we get into our 60s and 70s, and the studies show that at this age, people are a lot happier than, say, their 40s or even in their teens.
And how's that changing your music, both the music that you write and sing for yourself and for others, but also the music you write with others?
Well, lately I have just been writing on my own. I find that now, as I'm writing, when I'm talking about a female, I'm dealing more with her issues and her challenges. So, with a lot of my hits, it was basically about myself and how I was feeling, right? Which is why they did better in the States. Because Canada, generally speaking, people are less emotional. In the States, you'll hang out with someone for 5 minutes, they'll be telling you about their abortion. And so, because I'm such an emotional writer, America was a better territory for me.
Mm-hmm.
But now when I'm writing, I'm trying to deconstruct what the woman I'm writing about is going through, and then trying somehow to reassure her. So it's less about me now.
Oh, that's really interesting. And as you get older, as we all get older, there is this perspective that kind of sets in. Do you feel like some urgency as you're getting older to continue to create the stuff that's still in there?
Actually, no, I don't. I don't feel that urgency. I do know that if I want to stay kind of grounded and feel good, that I have to play piano and guitar and sing every day. Mm-hmm. I mean, but it's not like a chore for me. It's just, I just know I have to do that. But how wonderful. You don't have to go anywhere. You go to your piano, then you go to your guitar, you sing like you're a teenager. So music does ground me and does make me feel really, really good. So I have to, if I don't play music and sing for 2 or 3 days, first of all, I lose my voice. It's just like an athlete. You have to train. Singing is an athletic.
Even after 3 days.
Yeah, it starts to go. I don't care who you are, but I know beyond that, if I don't play music, for 3 days, I'm not going to feel as good.
And you've taught, I'm sure you were talking earlier that you sometimes run like 20 kilometers in a morning. And that's also something that has really kept you balanced. Of course, that's something that I'm very passionate about is that connection between physical activity, mental health, and just overall well-being.
Well, as you know, all the studies show that exercise, for many people that are dealing with depression, I'm not saying severe depression, but is better for you, heals more than therapy and meds combined. And you probably know this. There was just a report that people that are recovering from, say, colon cancer, the recovery is much better if they're exercising.
I mean,
so that's you just can't say enough things about the power of exercise.
You've had challenges in your life, quite a few of them. You speak openly about having prostate cancer. You're all over the hospital, by the way. I got a poster in there. And you have a lot of courage in that you've really, I know you're a private person, but you've really put yourself out there as well when you think it's going to make a difference. And was that kind of your thought when you started talking about your prostate cancer, but not enough people were talking about it?
Well, yeah, it's I'm sure you know, it's the male equivalent to breast cancer. So it hits 1 out of every 8 men. I think the stats are kind of similar with maybe 1 out of every 7. And because men don't talk the way women do, men usually don't talk about this stuff. They actually feel almost ashamed about it, and they don't talk about the potential repercussions or side effects of that kind of surgery. So the thing with me is there's a disconnect between what I write, whether prose or songs, and the way I present as a man. As a man, I'm very typical of someone raised in the 50s. I was raised to not talk about my emotions. I was raised to be very, very polite around women, that women were fragile, so you can never contradict them. So as a man, I don't reveal that much about myself because it's actually pretty easy to flip the conversation where the person you're interacting with is talking about themselves. So if they ask me about politics, again, I flip the question back to them and they talk about politics. So as a man, I don't really reveal that much. I don't post anything. If I'm checking a Facebook thing, I might say, "Wow, that's a beautiful photo." I don't give my opinion about anything in Facebook or
this is noted because we're having a pretty intimate conversation. So if all of a sudden the lens turns towards me, I'm onto you. I know what you're doing, right?
Yeah. So but it makes sense in a way. I mean, now they're all talking about the power of journaling, right? Journaling is supposed to be very healing. Well, obviously, songwriting is the opposite. I mean, it's the ultimate journaling.
Ultimate journal, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I get through a lot of stuff and deal with a lot of stuff because of the writing and the music. So maybe I don't have to talk so much about myself in some kind of open and vulnerable way.
And nobody's going to argue with you when you journal. No, we're right.
Yeah. And somehow if it's a song, somehow you can almost say anything was written well enough. I mean, if Sting can write Every Breath You Take, and sometimes people say it's a stalker song, that's a great example of a song where if it wasn't a song, people might think there's something a little off about this.
Yeah.
But because he weaves into such a great song, it just becomes an iconic song. It's not reflecting on Sting's sense of stalkerdom or possession,
Yeah. And it occurs to me because, I run an organization called Unsinkable, and we focus on mental health. We focus on people's stories. We do it all through storytelling and really, like for me, when I wrote the book Unsinkable, and you and I've talked about when you wrote your book, My Father's Son, right? There's this cathartic process you go through, and so the writing itself is a way of healing. And then if you're lucky, your book, my book, I know, helped other people heal.
Absolutely.
Which is a beautiful thing about any art. But all the things you're talking about, like running, journaling, singing, like these are actually things that we talk about a lot in the mental health space, about how, medication totally has a place. Therapy totally has a place, but these are other fundamental aspects of keeping our equilibrium as best we can.
Yeah, in most, this is not to condemn doctors per se, but they don't tend to talk about those kind of things. They just want to throw meds at you. Now, I'm not one of those conspiracy type people that think meds don't work. I do believe that they work. That being said, there's an awful lot of things you can accomplish both mentally and physically with physical exercise. Actually, I do my best practicing or rehearsing or writing after a run, because as you know, you get a sense of serenity after a long workout. So then it's easy to sit at the piano for 3 hours, where if I do it before a run, I might get kind of fidgety. Yeah, wiggles. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And there's that tie. And do you think, we're living in a world where people are talking more about what's going on inside them, and you've always done that through music, right? Your music is very emotional, and it sounds like you have your outlets too, like your own version of journaling. Are you noticing a shift, especially with men? Because I always say that when it comes to our mental health, that silence kills.
Yeah, absolutely. It's toxic. Well, to be honest, Silken, I have not noticed men changing, and all the stats show now that, for example, boys, boys into early 20s are suffering more than ever. I mean, for example, the opioid addiction from kids from like 15 to 19 is just like off the racks. So actually, I don't think, in my experience, I don't see that men are more open now than they were, say, in the 50s, 60s, or 70s. I haven't noticed that,
and that the things that they have to mood alter are increasingly dangerous.
Well, yeah, especially being on on the computer and getting into that bad rabbit hole of a lot of really bad stuff. And
I'm excited to share that Ventum Financial, a sponsor of Inflection Time, has launched their new podcast called Relevant. At Ventum, they believe that sharing someone's story is a privilege, and Relevant brings those stories to life. It's where leaders, creators, change makers share ideas, shaping business, culture, and the world, one conversation at a time. I'll be joining Relevant for an episode to talk about resilience, optimism, strength, and how these qualities help us grow through change. I hope you enjoy that episode. Check out Relevant by Ventum Financial, where people are discovered. You've got children. Do you have grandkids?
I have one grandchild. He's 15.
Okay. Oh, he's 15. So are you seeing that a little bit? Like where you kind of like come out and run with me?
Sure. He comes over, if I'm not working, he comes over every weekend. Okay. And if I am working, often I get him to help me. He's a bit of an anomaly. He's a crazy reader. He's reading War and Peace or 1984. He's an unbelievable writer. He's an unbelievable artist. He not into any social media. He doesn't do any social media. He has a cell phone, which he never uses. So I would have to say he's a total anomaly. And he's very confident as well.
Dan, you have a really remarkable family. I mean, but both your parents were your civil rights activists. Your dad was a leader in the civil rights movement. Your brother, Lawrence Hill, is a fabulous writer.
Yeah.
I think, gosh, what was the dinner conversation like in your home? Yeah.
Well, we were all pretty crazy too.
Yeah.
There was a thin line, a lot of schizophrenia and bipolar in my family. My mom, my sister, my son. Mm-hmm. So there was this kind of interesting kind of crossover between the insanity and the intellectual. It was words. Words were our superpower. You weren't allowed
and sometimes your weapons.
Yeah. You weren't allowed to watch TV. So all we could do was read.
I don't think most people realize that bipolar disorder, they call it, is actually the most genetically linked mental illness. And so when somebody in the family presents as bipolar, it's a pretty straight line between,
Absolutely.
the grandchild and the child and the parent. And, the other thing that, we know about bipolar is that it's very treatable. Like you can, so many of the symptoms and the tough things about bipolar can be really well addressed through medication, which isn't necessarily true of other mental illnesses.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm on Seroquel, for example, which is really an antipsychotic.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those kind of compliant people. So if I'm prescribed something, I usually take it,
I was recently diagnosed with bipolar 2.
Okay.
And, my whole life I thought it was depression and anxiety.
What was that like, though, when you were first diagnosed? How did you feel?
It sucked, because I realized I had an internal stigma of bipolar disorder. I was okay to say, oh, I have depression, or I have mild depression, or I take a little bit of antidepressant. And then when I was re-diagnosed, I actually went into depression.
No, it's a real...
Because I had this internal stigma. And then there was another layer, which is I felt ashamed of being ashamed.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's because I am a mental health advocate. I have a charity focused on mental health. And here, but the great news for me has been that, medication has just made life so much easier.
I couldn't agree more.
And I was lucky. I never had psychotic breaks or anything like that. And bipolar 2 tends to be like that. You have your moods and ups and downs, and you have these really creative periods and really, productive periods, and your less productive periods, a little bit of depression. So you can see how it's missed.
Absolutely. They say bipolar is the hardest thing. I was bipolar around 19, and I wasn't diagnosed till 2014. They all missed it.
Yeah, because
they thought I was quirky, creative.
Yeah, which you were. You were creative. You are quirky. It's a wonderful thing, and that's all part of it, though, isn't it? I think it's easy to say this is all the disease. it's all who makes Dan Hill, and it's all who makes me. And I guess I'm getting to that place, Dan, of challenging my own stigma and saying, wow, well, this is me. This is how I'm showing up. Yesterday, I didn't know that I had bipolar disorder. Today, I do. Okay, what's the big deal is what other people think and what stories they have in their own head about what it is to have any kind of mental illness, but particularly ones that we don't understand and we're afraid of, like schizophrenia, like bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. So I feel like it would be inauthentic when you've just told me your story for me to not share mine.
Sure, I understand.
And I'm just starting to share it. And
it's so recent. You only found out
it's recent. And, maybe at this stage, we don't care as much.
Well, I would totally agree with that. If someone feels I'm weird because I'm bipolar, so be it.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not your friend anyhow. You can have better friends.
Yeah. And obviously your friends are really important. So it makes sense to have friends that, I know it sounds kind of corny, but have values that are similar to yours. I'll just put it that way. Most of my friends are people who were my label mates when I was signed to different recording companies. They never went to university. So my label mates from RCA to whatever, they were kind of like the university substitutes, right? So, and they're still my friends,
And I think that there's an age and a stage, if we're lucky, if we've been doing the internal work, if we stayed open and curious about people and curious about life. And I know you have, I know I have. And it's a beautiful time to be aging when you have all that. And then you get to the point where you're like, okay, I understand you might not understand that, but maybe you should get curious. Maybe you should seek to understand so that you can understand me. And for me, talking about this now is really about thinking about other people,
of course,
who are struggling and might be that the fact I said it might make them feel more comfortable with themselves.
Yeah.
I just want to project forward as kind of one of our last questions as we wind down here, and I feel like we need to do Dan Hill 1 and Dan Hill 2 because there's so much to talk about in your life. But as you kind of are casting forward now and thinking about, maybe it just sounds like right now you're kind of in this organic process where you're making music and you're just really paying attention to what shows up. Is there anything that you sort of feel on the horizons that's really exciting you?
For me, I'm just looking forward to, I'm going to be doing a tour of the Maritimes. And these days, I just perform alone. I've kind of gone full circle. When I started performing, when I was 12, 13, 14, I was alone. Then at a certain point, I had a band. Then at a certain point, I just had a piano player. And I feel like I've come full circle now, where it's just me performing alone with a guitar and a keyboard. And for me, it just feels more raw and more real and more exposed. So I actually really look forward to touring the Maritimes because my experience is that they love music more than any other part of the
and they understand it, and it's part of their culture.
Yeah, and they perform music for each other. They learn how to play the fiddle, the guitar. So it's a great experience because the people are just so interesting and warm and to use your word, curious.
When I was at the peak of my fame in Canada, it was probably the 5, maybe 8 years after winning Olympic bronze medal, and it was because of my accident and
of course,
the fact that that I recovered in 10 weeks on this, and people really associated me with courage and overcoming adversity, and they wanted me to inspire them. Like when I would meet people, they always, you could tell they wanted me to say something positive and inspiring, and that was associated with me. And at some point, I started to feel like this tension between this public person who always was positive, who always thought any obstacle was surmountable. And then this person that was in a hotel room, sometimes just asking herself, what's the meaning of all this? And who am I to inspire? Like feeling like at some level I was a fraud, but also what I understand now, I was actually dealing with, very deep depression.
Of course.
And I didn't have a word for it. And that kind of came to a head for me when I started raising my kids, and the pressure got more and more and more. And, it kind of led to a meltdown. And from there, I kind of had to rebuild and redefine myself individually outside of what other people expected and thought of.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this, Dan, as I was preparing to have this conversation. I mean, it was such a blessing, that you had this beautiful song that meant something to my mom. It still means something to a lot of people. I mean, I still sing it, and but it's not the only song that you've created. You've created beautiful music since then. And I wonder if you ever felt a bit confined by not only that song, but, what the music industry was in those years, and the performing and all that went into those years after that big hit.
Well, it was a different culture back in the 70s, whereby there was even more stultifying roles that men were supposed to play, So we weren't allowed to show emotions. We weren't allowed to be vulnerable. And so I was writing songs that totally were in the face of that dictum. And so I got a lot of backlash from male critics, because they thought the big word back then was, the big insult was to be called a wimp. That was the word. There are all these, there's the W word, the N word, the C word, well, the W word. And so they threw that around at me a lot. And it seemed like the more I was cascaded by the media, the better my sales. It was almost like a backlash to the backlash. And it was very hard to reconcile who I was, because and even if you didn't want to read the reviews, somebody was always, I go see my doctor. It's
how do you feel about that?
Yeah, here's a review you got, and it was a bad. I go, you're my doctor. You're supposed to make me feel better. Why are you showing me bad reviews? So, and again, in your 20s, it's much more important what people think of you, right? So I didn't have the objectivity of maturity to realize this was happening, because men weren't supposed to behave this way, So that was hard. I felt hurt an awful lot. It was a very extreme existence, because either people thought you were God, or people would say you're a disgrace to the Canadian.
But I mean, that's part of the problem, isn't it? Like and it's worse than ever. We put these musicians, these actors on this pedestal, like they know best. I mean, the pop culture is got opinions on everything, things that they probably shouldn't have opinions on, in terms of like influencing so heavily, right? And we forget, like, no, these are like human beings, and yeah, some of their opinions are really valid and important, but like, should we be taking, should young people be taking their entire view of the world from young artists? And probably not.
Absolutely not.
There's other things,
yeah.
But it also can become. I wonder, when you were traveling, when you were performing, when you were kind of in the peak of your, public fame, if you had that kind of inner discourse too, that, like, you're out here, everybody thinks you're great, but maybe inside you're not feeling so great.
Well, yes. And I was just working like crazy. There weren't as many airlines, there weren't as many routes. So I played New Orleans one day at 90 degrees and humid. I played Winnipeg the next day, 30 below zero. Now, in a way, that was good, because I didn't have any time to reflect on the success of me as an artist or as a songwriter. I just didn't have time. But I was like always tired, and you may relate to this as an athlete. I was always afraid of losing my voice, because, that kind of travel, the air, the lack of, very dry airplane, fatigue, that was a big concern always. Do I have my voice? Do I have my voice? Am I going to lose it? Am I going to bring shame to myself and my family? So it was just so frantic and just so intense, and there was never any let up. I remember I finished touring with Art Garfunkel for 4 months, and I was supposed to have 5 days off, and I was so excited. And then they said, no, you have to go to England to sing Top of the Pops, because the only way you can have a hit in Europe is you have to do Top of the Pops. So those 5 days off, I had to take the Concorde to England, perform on Top of the Pops, got in that fist fight with Elvis Costello, who thought it was a wimp, and then Concorded back then to New York, then flew to Washington, did another show. So it was quite insane. I did get addicted to sleeping pills.
Okay, because you're so darn tired.
Yeah, and that was a bad thing, because in my case, I think you develop a tolerance. So before you know it, you're taking more and more and more. And that's a really good way to move on to another world, especially if you start, combining it with alcohol. I mean, that's how Jimi Hendrix died, for example. And that's a very, very dangerous combination. And I remember one night I was doing a show. I said, that's it, no more sleeping pills. And I threw them out on my balcony and they went into a garden below. 15 minutes later, in the garden, on my hands and knees, trying to find the sleeping pills, which was kind of, again, a big red flag, like, what, you've got to get this together. Yeah. So, yeah, I did have addictions. It seems to me that almost everybody I've met who've gone through periods like this, because I've toured with a lot of these people, we all kind of went through the same process. You almost feel like
you made it through it.
Yeah, and some do and some don't.
It's not just because you're artists. I mean, people say, "Oh, artists are more fragile," and maybe that's true. You're more sensitive. You feel the world more completely, potentially. But it is also a bananas lifestyle. Like that would drive anybody batty.
Yeah, and but I tend to kind of pivot to the positive stories. I'm kind of like that in general. I don't tend to remember bad things. I tend to not allow myself to go there. So I think about John, who was a crazy on everything and then hasn't had anything for 20 years. There are a lot, or I think of Paul McCartney, who's still touring at 84.
I know. It's amazing.
Or Mick Jagger, So
you turn that corner.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that die early. Rock and roll, it's one of two extremes. Either you die early, they call it the 27 Club, because Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Amy Winehouse, and Jim Morrison, they all died at the age of 27. So it's either you die young, or somehow you get it together and you're living into your 90s. The longest lifespan are musical conductors. They usually live into their 90s or more.
You got good brains.
Yeah, and it's something they love to do.
It's something they love to do. I totally get that. I mean, I'm at the age now where I'm, lots of my friends are just starting to think about retirement, or they are retiring. It's really weird. And I'm like, why are you retiring? You're really young. But, it's a magical number. It's 55 or 60 or 65. Sure. And I just think like, and it's because I have flexibility and I'm privileged to do something I love, but I'm like, I have zero desire to retire. I still want to keep creating, whether it's this podcast, whether it's my new book that's coming out, or like, it's that creative urge, but it's also, for me, I feel like I still have stuff to say. I still have stuff to share.
And it gives you a sense of purpose, which we all need.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you say you don't feel like you've lived the day until you've gone into your studio, or you've done some writing, or you said you play the piano or the guitar.
Oh,
it's just, it seems like it's as natural as breathing for you.
It is. Because I really started doing that when I was 9, 8.
And how do you think, growing up, we just talked briefly about, I know in that household, we talked and laughed about it a little bit, but like super high performers.
Very intense.
All of you, right? How did that shape you?
Well, it was, because of my father, I was extremely driven, really, really obsessed with success and making a mark. But also with my father, because he was very controlling. I had to figure out how to defy him, So it was a combination of picking up his, inheriting his desire to be a super performer. Part of that is a middle-class Black experience, because in order to transcend the racism, you do have to be a super performer. So I understand now why that was so important to him. So I caught that. I was writing songs when I was 8. But it was sucky to write about girls, so I would write about my cat, love songs. And then my dad thought he thought I was gay, because he couldn't understand how I could be that sensitive. Yeah. And then he thought I was into bestiality. I'm not. I didn't even know what the word meant.
I just like my cat.
Yeah. So a lot of time was spent figuring out how I could, rebel against my dad, which ultimately was a really healthy thing. I did become a serial liar. So he'd say, you can't be on a sports team because that's going to wreck your education. But I would be on the wrestling team, the cross country team.
He just went.
I would just lie, So, and then I ended up doing what I wanted. So I probably had a bit of an issue with honesty, because that was how I had to.
I mean, he was a civil rights activist. Your mom was white. I still remember you telling me that story of, and I think I read it first in your book, about your mother going in the hospital to deliver her first baby, and your dad appearing, and he was Black and she was white. and the way that they treated her because it was an interracial marriage. And I'm like, how long ago was that?
1954.
1954.
Yeah, they took out her appendix.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, take a breath.
But she was so brave.
She was so brave.
Yeah, so she was...
I would have loved to meet her because she was brave. It sounds like she was kind of like the rock in the family.
She was also a real rebel.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
And she turned me on to great music and great female writers. You know.
Did she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why we at with Alice Munro, Jermaine Greer, you know.
Yeah.
She was the gateway.
Yeah. To that whole creativity,
Yeah.
that kind of, because your dad, it sounds like your dad, he was a lawyer, right? I'm not a judge.
No, he was actually, he had a PhD in sociology. Mm-hmm. And as you already said, in 1965, he became the head of the Ontario Human Rights Commission. And there is nothing like that anywhere in Canada before. And so on his own, he built that commission.
Such a remarkable family.
Yeah.
Really such a remarkable family. And your brother wrote the Book of Negroes, right?
Yeah.
So there's at least 2 writers, if not 3 in your family.
Yeah, my mom wrote some books too, my dad, my granddad. The writing was the thing we were expected to do.
Yeah.
It was the music.
The word.
That was the flute. They weren't used to the musical gene. They were used to the writer's gene.
Yeah. So you had the musical gene, but you also had the writer's gene. So
I kind of
got it all.
Merged them both together.
And with it all, Dan, as you know, you got the feels too, right? And that makes you such a great writer. And honestly, the first time I met you, I just thought, this is a really special human. And just hearing and listening to you today, I feel that even more strongly.
Thank you.
You've been through so much and you've contributed so much.
Yes. I think it really helps because we have been through so much ourselves and with our family. I think it really helps to sometimes remind yourself that you're not alone. Mm-hmm. That, every family has challenges, just that most families don't talk about it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think personally, when I wrote my book Unsinkable, it was kind of like, throwing a grenade into the family story that had been created. Mm-hmm. And through the members of the family who hadn't really dealt or processed their stuff, it threw them into it.
Yeah, I know that must have been really hard for you.
It was really hard. It was. I mean, my sister wrote a letter to Maclean's, basically denouncing the book, and yet I've said this so many times, but I'll say it again. It was probably the most liberating thing I've ever done.
Yeah, of course.
Because it was like, woohoo! It's out there. I'm free. Like the truth is out there, and now I can just be who I am.
Good.
And I think that people who don't get to do that, either you don't have to publish a book and tell the world about it necessarily, but if you never get to find out what's true, and you never get to speak your truth, I just think that's tragic.
Yeah, I do too. I think the key to writing a book is you have to be fearless. And there's been so many cases of backlash. Alice Munro, terrible backlash from her family and from the small town that she was writing about, even though she disguised it. Hemingway, terrible backlash. Usually if there's a backlash, it's because you've said something that's very powerful, but also very raw. I mean, if it wasn't something powerful, you wouldn't have, had to endure the backlash, which doesn't make it easier when it's happening. Oh my God. Yeah. The stuff that happened to me, my dad was no longer alive when my book came out in 2009, but man, my mom was, and my sister, they were not happy, even though I really didn't write about them.
No. And it's funny because I read in the book, I mean, it's a beautiful book, and I don't really find it particularly inflammatory, but I guess it's because you put a spotlight on their life and they were like...
Well, I wasn't afraid to call my father out. I tried to do a balanced representation of him. But one of the things I feel now that I didn't even feel when I was writing it back in 2009 was they were always there. He never left. Mm-hmm. And so that counts for something.
It does count for something. And you know what? As you said, going back to how they were raised, and your dad being a Black man in Canada, and your parents obviously being in an interracial marriage, like they had reasons to fear. They had reasons to, be quiet about their private lives. So, it must have been hard because, you did something public. And
well, I would have to say, looking back, it was a gift. It was, in a lot of ways, that's a big part of what shaped me and caused me to be a songwriter and musician. So although obviously it's not easy when we're growing up in tumultuous families, looking back at it now, I'm really happy I did grow up in the family I grew up in.
I agree. I think it makes us strong. I think it makes us deeply compassionate. And I don't like the word tolerant, but I think you can have a broader view and a more open view of the world if you've come through your own, storm growing up. And, the last question I wanted to ask you was just about that advice. We like to ask this of all of our guests.
Right.
That advice that you'd give a young songwriter, somebody, if you could cast back to when you were 19,
Sure.
20, writing those first songs.
Okay, well, there's a few things. First, be authentic. I used to go on all these talent contests when I was 14, 15. And a lot of the people in these tried to sound like Gordon Lightfoot, Joni Mitchell. I knew they were doomed, because they weren't original. So be authentic. B, this sounds very old-fashioned. It really helps your writing if you can play an instrument. Even if you just write words. If you play guitar, it's going to help. If you get guitar and piano, it helps even more. When I started playing piano, I started to write a lot more hits than just on guitar. And so be authentic, be yourself, and learn how to play an instrument, at least one. And the instruments to really learn are instruments that you can write on, meaning guitar, piano. Yes, violin is great, but you can't learn to write with a violin. So that's definitely my advice.
Really good advice. And anybody out there wants to be a songwriter, you got it, Dan Hill. It's been gorgeous to have you here. Thank you for joining us on Inflection Time. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'd love for you to follow us by subscribing and sharing our podcast on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Inflection Time is an Archer & Co. production sponsored by Good Life Fitness and Ventum Financial. A special thank you to our incredible in-kind partners, Carter Wiley and Tallboy Water. Executive producers and directors, Michelle Archer and Phil Kluba. Producer, Christine Bays. Creative development, Sarah Carter. I'm grateful for Smythe for helping me look good. Thank you for listening.